Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We do have a very good one for you today, and really the big theme, I guess you could say, of the first two stories of our show is really another Screw the Democrats show, because boy, is there a lot of material for this. And really, one thing that I found has been absolutely fascinating to watch is the gap between Biden and Trump on not rhetoric, because obviously the whole point of Biden really is rhetoric change. That was the big appeal. So many people voted for him because of that reason. But the policy difference is getting smaller, and smaller. On the border, Kamala Harris echoing Trump's words to a T, attacking legal asylum seekers coming from the Guatemalan border, which, oh, by the way, the U.S. probably bears more responsibility than any other country in the world for destabilizing back in 1954, leading to a cycle of violence. The U.S. has done nothing to help, but really even continue to hurt with puppet dictator far-right regimes ever since. Meanwhile, Omar has been attacked yet again by vicious smear merchants in the House Democratic Caucus. That goes, unfortunately, well, not really, I guess, screw her, but all the way up to the top with Nancy Pelosi. So, yeah, that seems to be a pretty disappointing thing. And also, there's the left-wing guy who went to Peru, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, let's get right into it, starting with a CNN report. Vice President Kamala Harris endured a rocky first foreign trip since taking office, with sources telling CNN her two-day swing through Mexico and Guatemala left some administration officials quietly perplexed about what they perceive as a bumpy answer to questions about whether she would go to the U.S.-Mexico border. Several sources said there was real hope inside the White House that Harris's first trip abroad would be a success, and worry that what looked like ill-prepared answers to the inevitable question would overshadow it. So this is, again, about stuff going on with the U.S.-Mexico border. So two White House officials familiar with the dynamic pretty much see that have emphasized that internally that they want to focus on the conditions in Central America that push migrants to the southern border, as President Biden tasked her to do. That's literally what that was her idea. A record number of unaccompanied children crossing into the U.S. this spring, despite throngs of desperate minors presenting a heart-rending problem as well as a political one. And it's really not just, put them in housing that is appropriate and kind of figure out how to deal with them, especially in these asylum situations where the U.S. in large parts bears deep responsibility for what is going on. That is not really acknowledged by the mainstream Democratic Party. Biden announced Harris's new assignment on March 24th ahead of an immigration meeting in the White House State Dining Room, telling reporters that he had asked the vice president because she's the most qualified person to do it, to lead our efforts with Mexico and Northern Triangle. This is obviously ridiculous, but Kamala Harris, what gives her the qualifications to lead anybody on immigration? I do not know. After the announcements, Harris's aides appeared to panic, according to the officials, out of concern that her assignment was being mischaracterized and could be politically damaging if she were linked to the border at a time they were facing a growing number of arrivals. So again, the focus right off the bat, as it has always been with Kamala Harris, and will continue to be, because this is the politician she is and always has been. It's about politics. It's not about the fact that, again, I'm not saying this is unique to her. I think with Biden, he doesn't know what the hell is going on, so you can't quite make that comparison with him. But any real Democratic figure would be kind of, I think, reacting the exact same, because this is just who they are. They just do not care. The thing they care most about is that, when she inevitably runs either in 24 or 28, once again, tries for her next shot of power, then she doesn't want whatever Republican is going to be like, oh yeah, you didn't advocate for nuking all migrants, whatever the position they have is going to be at the time. One of the officials Harris appears eager for a portfolio that will allow her to achieve political victories. There it is again. It's not about, actually making the world a better place, solving problems, improving lives, whether it be on the American side of the border or the Mexican or Guatemalan side. It is about politics. It's about political gain. that is something that I think needs to be emphasized, because there's this fig leaf bullcrap that we continue to see over and over again with the media being like, oh, she really cares. She's really, I saw some absolutely disgusting coverage. At the same time, Kamala Harris is at the border being like, oh, don't come. Migrants, Guatemalan kids, who are fleeing gang violence or whatever, poverty, fuck off. That's pretty much what she said to them in, not exact terms. Just fuck off. That is the message. And, she said it a little bit nicer with a little bit more of an emphatic, conciliatory tone than Trump did, but policies still the exact damn same. So instead, Republican critics in the media have portrayed her immigration rule as a border assignment, potentially opening up to criticizing the criticism for the handling of the seemingly intractable problem. And the thing with this is always, whenever there's a quote-unquote intractable problem that's so scary that, we can't possibly begin to think about fixing, what is really more often than not, there's a problem sitting very well within reach. It's a problem that, activists are begging the Democratic Party to do, but, there is just no response there. And I really want to see if the CNN story here that we are using is going to be highlighting the bad oopsie moment that I'm thinking of, because I just pulled this up, and it's going to be interesting. They could be just talking about a completely different thing, which will be interesting, but we will play for you the clip that I mentioned earlier in the show. So, officials made clear that they didn't view the overall outcome of the trip as driven by a single answer during a TV interview. Shocking. And the goals of the trip were largely attained. However, they acknowledged it was a soundbite that will likely stick with Harris as she continued to confront issues at the southern border. The response came during an interview with NBC's Lester Holt that aired Tuesday, in which Harris was pressed about the fact she hadn't visited the U.S.-Mexico border. At some point, we're going to the border, Harris said in an interview. We've been to the border, so this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border. Holt responded, you haven't been to the border. And she says, I haven't been to Europe. And I mean, I don't understand the point you're making. I'm not discounting the importance of the border. So pretty much what she's saying here is, this is the hit. This is the hit in the CNN world of, this is the worst possible thing that Republicans are used to, like, tie her down to the border. It's the fact that she didn't stand up in front of the fence in the heat and being like, yep, this is a real problem. That is what the mainstream media views as border policy. That's doing something to them. Standing up, having their click cameras take photos away. That counts as real serious leadership. Basically, what a Republican would do. So just ridiculous stuff there. Kamala's right on that one. But when it comes to the fact that what she actually said that was important, and that I've seen get a lot of play online, but it really did seem that she was being kind of pressured to change her tune. As it became clear on Tuesday, their answers were distracting from her border trip, acknowledging she would eventually visit the border without specifying when. Yeah, it's really so dumb. Like, this is the big thing. Oh, she didn't stand in front of the fence and say, oh my God, this is a big problem. Unbelievable. But, yeah, so this is in Slate now. And of course, yeah, they didn't even bring that up in the CNN article. I cannot believe that was a, big, horrific, mistake. She said, oh, I hadn't been to the border fence. You can do so many other more helpful things without physically standing at the border fence. All that is a complete and utter photo op. So yeah, she writes, this is in Slate now, said, quote, it may seem that there are a few policies where Democrats and Republicans are more divided than immigration. After all, while former President Trump let xenophobia and cruelty toward migrants drive his policy decisions, President Joe Biden has promised to implement policies that promote integration, inclusion, and citizenship. So yeah, again, rhetoric. That is the biggest difference between the two. Joe Biden is a president so that when liberals turn on the TV, they can feel good about themselves, because that's pretty much the biggest extent of what being a liberal is nowadays. It's just feeling good about yourself and feeling superior to other people. That's really what it's about 99% of the time. They're not really interested in doing anything except for self-gratification and gratifying themselves while really changing little to nothing about the world around them. So, for example, while the Biden administration has done a lot to expand the capacity of the Office of Refugee Resettlement to reduce the number of unaccompanied migrants under Border Patrol custody, it has also kept the border closed under Title 42, which closes the border to non-essential travel for public health purposes, turning away families and individuals, even those applying for asylum, which is kind of snuck up on me, a legally sketchy thing to do, if I do say so myself. It's also continued to use immigration detention, and has, in fact, overseen a rise of. It has, in fact, overseen a rise in the number of border crossers. And at least, the very attempt to kind of come in there and say, hey, we should look at why they're coming here in the first place, like the push factors, not the pull factors, because, to be honest, there aren't very many pull factors for the U.S. other than its proximity as kind of the first big country nearby. But here is the clip. So where she's addressing the issue of illegal immigration.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come. The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our border. There are legal methods by which migration can and should occur. But we, as one of our priorities, will discourage illegal migration. And I believe if you come to our border,
again, a lot of these people are seeking asylum.
So let's discourage,
which is legal,
our friends, our neighbors, our family members from embarking on what is otherwise an extremely dangerous journey.
And again, this kind of plays into the idea that, they're doing it for fun, and they're just doing it because, they want to take a nice stroll to the United States. People make this trek because they're absolutely desperate. There's no, you don't need to tell. Kamala Harris, of all people, does not need to tell migrants how dangerous it is to cross from the U.S. to Mexico. It really is a pretty incredible and pretty noticeable thing, and that the United States is trying to do here. Just the blatant contradictions in policy that we see, and not too much of an addressing, I would say, of the reality of the situation and the push factors, which Biden supposedly sent her in there to do.
Where in large part the only people who benefit are coyotes.
This is Mike Pence in 2018, to give you a little bit of contrast.
Let me be clear on this point. The United States of America is the most welcoming home for immigrants in human history. You are our neighbors. We want you and your nations to prosper and thrive across Central America. Don't risk your lives or the lives of your children by trying to come to the United States on a road run by drug smugglers and human traffickers.
Yeah, again, they all know how dangerous it is, but they come anyway. Why is that? That is, I think, a question that really should be answered and looked into. And at the same time, Pence was saying that back in 2018, Kamala was getting her protest boots on. She was saying, say it loud and say it clear. Immigrants are welcome here. Oh, that's great. What's the change? Right. Just like everything, literally everything is about with Kamala Harris. Politics. All about politics. All about the fact that, she's in a little bit of a different situation now, so we got to change things up. So the journey here is in large part dangerous because the United States has militarized the border and forced migrants into the shadows. If the concern was the dangerous journey, that should be solved by easing migration restrictions and demilitarizing the border. And that's, I think, the militarization, I think, is a big aspect that is not really covered. Beyond the hypocrisy of the gall, Harris's comments are troubling because they signal another way in which the Biden administration is engaging in immigration policy continuity. Although, to be fair to Trump, telling people to not come did not start with his administration, really with Bill Clinton's policy of prevention through deterrence. Back then, the U.S. government made it harder to cross the border through more urban ports of entry in hopes that migrants would be dissuaded from coming through by the much more dangerous routes that they would have to take. And again, they still came. That is something that is a question that continues to bedevil our wonderful policy leaders to this time. Ilhan Omar, Under Attack. That's next.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Spencer Walsh Radio Network, and let me tell you about our lineup. Newsflash is all new Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays now, and that is, of course, our flagship show, but we have plenty of other great offerings for you, including Uncultured, live mixes every Saturday. Perfect way to celebrate or get ready for the Saturday night. Have a good time. Tune in to the Spencer Walsh Radio Network for live broadcasts. And Hidden History is every Thursday now on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. We got a banger new episode coming for you around midday or so tomorrow. So you have that to look forward to. Please support us. Listen to our podcasts wherever. But when you do, please be sure to rate and review us, because that does help get the word out there. I'm sure you know the drill if you listen to podcasts. You know what to do. It's the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. Thanks so much for listening.
All right, let's get into it now. Today, really interesting stuff going on with Ilhan Omar, and another great way to really show you the true nature of the Democratic Party, what's really about, and especially how far behind it is on the foreign policy front. So this is from USA Today. A group of lawmakers is criticizing, Democratic lawmakers, is criticizing Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota for what they said was comparing the human rights record of the United States and Israel with Hamas and the Taliban, a rare public rebuke against a fellow Democrat. So pretty much what this is, I would argue, an intentional taking out of context of a perfectly good and perfectly fair point Omar made, I believe, on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, possibly. Equating the U.S. and Israel to Hamas and Taliban is offensive as it is misguided, says Representative Brad Schneider, and 11 other Democrats wrote in a joint statement issued late Wednesday, ignoring the differences between democracies governed by the rule of law and contemptible organizations that engage in terrorism at best, discredits at one's intended argument, and at worst reflects deep-seated prejudice. So all these attacks, all these threats that Ilhan Omar continues to get, calling her, slurs like, raghead and, sand, N-word, all that stuff. You could think of all these phrases. They should be laid, in my opinion, at the doorsteps of people like Brad Schneider, Nancy Pelosi, all the other people, all the people in our Congress who have no issues, none, leaving her out to the wolves. That is what we're seeing here. We're seeing a complete and utter abandonment of someone in the House Democratic Caucus over something that really, in all good faith interpretations, she didn't even say. So, yeah, the United States and Israel, they're imperfect and, like all democracies, at times deserving of critique, but false equivalencies give cover to terrorist groups. We urge Ilhan Omar to clarify her words, placing the U.S. and Israel in the same category as Hamas and the Taliban. Again, no one really, in a good faith reading, actually kind of understood this. So this is a group led by Schneider, but also included Jake Auchincloss, by the way, in Joe Kennedy's old seat. Joe Kennedy probably would be signing this letter at all as well, so not much of a big improvement. Ted Deutsch, the Blue Dog from Florida. Lois Frankel, also from Florida. Josh Gottheimer, the sick, freak with real anger issues, and he's already had a big public spat with Rashid Tlaib a few years ago. So something about certain Muslim representatives does seem to get under his skin. Elaine Luria, part of the really disgusting crop of moderates coming out of Northern Virginia at the moment in the House Democratic Caucus. Kathy Manning of North Carolina. Gerald Nadler of New York. Impeachment darling, bowling ball congressman, Dean Phillips of Minnesota, Kim Schreier of Washington, Brad Sherman of California, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida, probably the most openly corrupt. No, I would actually say that's Henry Cuellar in Texas, but she's not far behind Debbie Wasserman Schultz in Florida. So, yeah, we must have the same level of accountability and justice for all victims of crimes against humanity. We have seen unthinkable atrocities committed by the U.S. True. Hamas. True. Israel. True. Afghanistan. True. And the Taliban. Also true. So pretty much saying, in a very diplomatic way, I would argue, that we should hold all parties accountable. And the idea that the U.S. and Israel have not committed any crimes is really a joke. I think, honestly, you can't, and this is obviously not what she was trying to do, but I think you very easily can draw a comparison. You can draw an equivalency between the actions of Hamas, which, by the way, have, about a tenth or maybe 100th of the power and resources that Israel and the United States do. And, by the way, Israel has those resources in large part, pretty much in sole part, because of the United States. They commit crimes. The United States has committed nothing but crimes pretty much for its entire existence. There's no, its very existence was built on the subjugation of African American slaves. So once you get from that point, it's hard to really turn back, and the United States certainly has not turned back. Destabilizing countries all across the world, causing chaos, killing civilians, all that stuff. Israel's done that too, just a few weeks ago. Obviously, we know this, and it is an objectively true fact. But let's take a closer look here at what Omar said. We must have the same level of accountability and justice for all victims of crimes against humanity. We have seen unthinkable atrocities committed by the U.S., Hamas, Israel, Afghanistan, and the Taliban. True, 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 and true. So what they say is, oh, you're spreading prejudice. So pretty much what they're doing is they're calling Ilhan Omar a Jew-hating racist. That is what they're implying by these words. She is spreading, at worst, prejudice. And, quote-unquote, undermines her argument at best. These are people who, when they come into Congress, they are out. They come in and they're out to get Ilhan Omar. These are not people. I think what the left should do, they would do well to remember all these names. Remember where the Democratic Party stands. Remember who they truly are. And this goes to the top. Nancy Pelosi was out there saying this. I mean, it's disgusting. It's really disgusting. And it's just sickening. And I think really what it should do is put things into perspective about the true nature of this party, because it is shameful every time.
I know you oppose the court's investigation in both Palestine and in Afghanistan. I haven't seen any evidence in either cases.
This is, again, the court. She's referring to the International Criminal Court. So the ICC is this is the only place Palestinians are supposed to, they're able to go to get any kind of justice, or the way they're supposed to do it, quote unquote, in the international states, the way the system works. So Afghan civilians, Palestinian civilians, they're coming out there and they're saying, we need to go to the court, and the last, quote unquote, systemic hope of any kind of justice that we may be able to achieve. That was their intention there. That's what they're trying to do, because they don't really have any other good recourse. What are they supposed to do? Write a petition, ask Israel nicely for human rights, or to stop bombing their hospitals and schools and roads and infrastructure and things like that, and killing civilians? No, that's ridiculous. But the United States is actively opposing these investigations. They're actively opposing what's going on the ICC. It's a perfectly fair question being asked here.
The domestic courts both can and will prosecute alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. And I would emphasize that in Israel and Palestine, this includes crimes committed by both the Israeli security forces and Hamas. In Afghanistan, it includes crimes committed by the Afghan national government and the Taliban. So in both of
so this is what she's trying to say is, and I think it's First of all, let's just take a step back and say the fact that this is being put out there on the international or national stage is so important. People are like, there's no other Congressman or woman who would come out there and be able to say the United States not only commits war crimes, but helps facilitate them, helps cover them up, and gives passes to the people who do. And that directly true fact, standing as clear as day in front of your face, is something that has just been completely ignored and dismissed as too taboo by members of the Democratic Party. So in an early Thursday tweet responding to her colleagues, Omar called the quote shameful for my colleagues who call me and ask for support. I'll just pull up the full tweet here. It's shameful for colleagues who call me when they need support. Put them on blast. Put them on blast, Ilhan. To now put up a statement asking for clarification and not just call. The Islamophobic tropes in the statement are offensive. The constant harassment and silencing from the signers of this letter is unbearable. I mean, this is what it's all about. This is what it's all about. They could have just got, if they were really deeply hurt and worried and deeply concerned by the comments Omar said, they probably would have just got, like a normal human would have done. I mean, maybe these people aren't normal. It's actually probably true. They're not, let's face it. They would have gone to her in private and say, hey, what did you really mean by that? And she would have told them. She would have told them graciously, as she says in this tweet. But what do? They put a big statement out of the media. They create a days-long media frenzy because that is what this is all about. This is about casting members like Ilhan Omar, casting members like Rashida Tlaib. What's going on there? I don't know. What do those two have in common? Like both Muslim congresswomen, both fearless advocates for Palestine, and critics of Israel, critics of the United States empire, like nobody else. Not even AOC. Nobody else in Congress. But what they're doing here is this is a public call out, and they're not doing this for their own benefit. They're not doing this for their own personal gratification. They're doing this to destroy her and get media pull from it. That is simple as that. Simple as that. Citing an open case against Israel, the U.S., Hamas, and Taliban in the ICC isn't comparison or from deep-seated prejudice. You might try to undermine these investigations or deny justice to their victims, but history has told us that truth can't be hidden or silenced forever. Amen. Amen. So very, very clear statement there from Omar. She was also backed up by AOC, saying that, quote, pretty sick and tired of the constant vilification, intentional mischaracterization. This is it. Again, this is what it was. If they had listened to the clip for 2 freaking seconds, they would have said this is intentional mischaracterization. But, I mean, honestly, it may not even be. Like, they may just be saying, hey, you know what? America's enemies should be investigated for war crimes, but not America's friends, because they don't commit war crimes. Because, we can't commit war crimes. We can't do anything wrong. Our friends can't do anything wrong. We can't hold them accountable. And if you do, you are forming deep-seated prejudice or whatever. It is ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. And it shows you how dangerous these people are. They have no concept for the danger they put her in by skipping private conversations and leaping to fuel targeted news cycles around her. So, yeah, I mean, if freaking Brad Schneider got a 100th of the incoming shit that Omar gets on a daily basis, like, he'd probably have to resign. Like, it's such a joke. Later in the day, Omar explained she was not drawing a moral equivalency, but said that she was asking Blinken about the ongoing, as it clearly says in the tweet, I asked Secretary Blinken where these victims of these crimes go for justice, if not the ICC. To be clear, the conversation was about accountability for specific incidents regarding the ICC cases, not a moral comparison between Hamas and the Taliban in the U.S. and Israel. She has a statement posted on her congressional website. I was no way equating terrorist organizations with democratic countries with well-established judicial systems. I mean, that's kind of a joke, but I don't. She just doesn't have to come out like me and say a full thing. Like, the idea that, the United States has a well-established judicial system. It does. It's well-established in, mass incarceration, for one thing. It's also well established in giving the right people the breaks when it wants to give them, because just like everything in this country, the judicial system is controlled by the powerful. And when the judicial system wants to work, when it wants to put people away like black people for carrying an ounce of marijuana, it will do that. It will do that without hesitation and without mercy. But if United States empire wants to continue to use Israel as a client state, it will continue to do so. War, crimes, killing civilians, all this stuff. Be damned. Be damned. And, same thing with the Afghanistan government. Although I don't know too much about that situation. Not nearly as much about as Israel and Palestine. Democratic House leaders, led by House Speaker, the absolute vulture snake scum, Nancy Pelosi, issued a statement trying to quell the uproar and say quell the uproar. The framing there from USA Today, such a joke. It's not about quelling the uproar. It's about saying, you know what? We won. Thank you. Now sit back down and shut up. That's what that's about. That is what that's about. Yeah, we welcome the clarification from you, Omar. You're a good little girl. Like, that is what that's about. Legitimate criticisms of the policies of both the United States and Israel. Again, legitimate criticisms. That is what she was doing. That is what she was doing. Who decides what's legitimate? Nancy Pelosi and all these ghouls who have pledged eternal loyalty to AIPAC and the Israeli state? Like, come on. Like, that is such a joke. That is who the terms of the debate are decided by right now. That is who they are decided by. So, again, but drawing false... Again, not what she did. Drawing false equivalencies between the democracies like the U.S. and Israel and groups that engage in terrorism like Hamas and Taliban foment prejudice and undermines progress toward a future of peace and security for all. She also, of course, drew fire from Republicans in 2019 over comments. It's just absolute jokes. And Democrats came to her defense then, arguing Omar's remarks that were taken out of context. And also, of course, they threw her under the bus over past comments that, Nancy Pelosi and all those other ghouls said was anti-Semitic. At a certain point, you have to wonder how much of it are this squad going to take before they do something in any kind of open show of resistance in the Democratic caucus, because they're just getting spit on time and time again, and no one is coming to their defense. And they're not even doing anything about it. Like, it's a joke. It's disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting. I'm sure. Yeah, Talia had a pretty good tweet about this. Freedom of speech doesn't exist for Muslim women in Congress. The benefit of the doubt doesn't exist for Muslim women in Congress. House Democratic leaders should be ashamed of its relentless, exclusive tone policing congresswomen of color. Thank you very much, Rashida. Yeah, so we are going to have a pretty interesting situation here to watch. So hopefully we'll be following that story for you, certainly. Hopefully it dies down and there's no more BS, but and it's going to be another, again, instructive story. This is who they are. Never forget it. And before we move on, another real good gem from Dianne Feinstein right now. Feinstein has just been asked about some Dems saying they would choose democracy over the filibuster, saying if democracy were in... And again, she said she wants to abolish the filibuster. She then promptly forgot her position because, again, to give some more context, there was a report, I believe, a few months ago that said, yeah, most of her aides believe she probably has some sort of mental degenerative disorder like Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that, because she's really struggling. And nothing happened. She, of course, continued to serve in the Senate for, she's up for, 4 more years in her term? I don't know. But she says, if democracy were in jeopardy, I would want to protect it, but I don't see it being in jeopardy right now. She goes on to say, Feinstein on nuclear filibuster for H.R. 1. It's an if. Let's wait and see what happens, okay? On filibuster reform, she might support it. I'd have to take a look right now. Nothing comes to my mind. Again, I don't think a lot's coming to her mind right now. I don't think a lot is coming to her mind at all. It is absolutely insane. There's a tweet from @Michael Whitney. Dianne Feinstein should be forced to draw a clock every time she expresses a opinion about democracy. So, sounds about right. Because she is, really out to lunch in a big way. So we are going to move Actually, you know what? Before we move on, let's get some reactions to the Ilhan Omar story. Further, it's great from the amazing host of Blowback Pod, journalist Noah Colwyn. The reason they are trying to stick it to Ilhan Omar like this is because they know how dangerous it is once people who hold elected office speak frankly about the atrocities that our government enables. The new Israeli PM is a guy who talks about Palestinians like it's a Donkey Kong high score, and the Democratic leadership has decided what's important is to muzzle people who point out what's going on. Not to sound all Lisa Simpson, but what part of this is supposed to be a sign of a healthy democratic rule? The fact that necrosis is bipartisan? I mean, it's a fair point. At Will Menaker, host of Chavo Trap House, adds on, sort of similar to how vigorously they will prosecute leakers who reveal things like billionaires routinely and openly breaking the law and avoiding paying taxes. So this is what they do. This is a mechanism in place to keep the system in order. So this is how they reward someone who has been pretty much nothing but conciliatory to the leadership. Never threatened them, never voted against Pelosi, never came close to doing so. And the first second they can, they throw under the bus for comments like this, because these are the comments you should be making, in my opinion, hopefully, every week. Heighten these contradictions, because the Democratic Party is disgusting. All right, we got some good news for you to end the show. Left-wing trade unionist Pedro Castillo will be president of Peru. Even as last votes are still being tallied in Peru's nail-biter elections, it looks like left-wing presidential contender Pedro Castillo will hold on to his narrow lead over right-wing opponent Keiko Fujimori in Jacobin. This report on this. We talked about this last show. The OAS has already declared the elections clean and fair, despite Fujimori's repeated accusation of fraud. It looks like they learned their lesson after Bolivia. Thank goodness. A 7.7% drop in Lima Stock Exchange seems to confirm what everyone else knows. Pedro Castillo will be the next president of the Republic of Peru. As the dust settles on an election cycle marked by anti-communist hysteria, questions are turning to what a future Castillo government might look like. Peru has never had a president that remotely resembled Castillo, an indigenous left-wing trade unionist. The only immediate comparisons are the policy-driven progressive politician Veronica Mendoza or nationalist former president Alonso Humala. Actually, only really underlies just how shocking it is. It's going to be to see someone of Castillo's social and political background in the government palace. Fueling the general climate of uncertainty is that the fact that Peru is currently really the world's highest COVID-19 death toll, has seen an 11% contraction of the economy and a 10% rise in poverty in just the last year. The country's acute social and economic crisis was a decisive factor in Castillo's victory. It also be posing questions about the incoming administration's ability to govern, a question compounded by uncertainty over the composition of the future administration, Castillo's uneasy relationship with his own party, Peru Libre, and how he will stand up to a majority opposition in Congress. So he's definitely got his work cut out from here. With so many question marks hanging over the future of Peru, there are still many important takeaways from Castillo's historic win that provide some indication of where the country may be headed. The battles that await his administration and the strategies Castillo should pursue to turn the unprecedented left-wing triumph at the ballot box into a popular victory for the Peruvian people. Build those deep social movements that Morales and Bolivia was able to build over the past 14 years. On a purely symbolic level, it would be hard to overstate the impact of Castillo's win. On one hand, it comes on the heels of a conservative restoration in Ecuador and a general sense of disorientation among large parts of the Latin American left. However, with neighboring Chile and Colombia already making marking a counter tendency and the possibility of a new cycle of radical policies in the region, a Castillo government represents a major shot in the arm for a left-wing resurgence. While Castillo's held high-profile talks with progressive former heads of state like Uruguay's José Pepe Mujica and Bolivia's Evo Morales, he was careful on the campaign trail to downplay the question of foreign policy and regional integration, unlike Humala, who in 2011 ran successfully on a pink tide ticket, partly a rearguard attempt to defuse right-wing attacks and right-wing attack campaigns. Of course, Venezuela is a favorite hobby horse of the Peruvian press. You think Venezuela talk is bad up here. Peru is right next door. Castillo made the elections squarely about the invisible Peruvian majority neglected by the nation's political class. In that same sense, Castillo's candidacy amounted to a referendum on the class's complete disconnect from popular concerns as a whole. The phrase, repeated ad nauseum, that no one saw Castillo coming actually became a self-indictment on the Peruvian right, whose erstwhile effective neoliberal populism incarnated in the figure of former leader Alberto Fujimori, the dictator and father of the candidate Kiko, who lost in a close one this time around, has completely crumbled in the wake of this region's second neoliberal crisis. That was soon really brought on by COVID. So these question marks coming will be solved, and we'll continue here on Newsflash to keep you updated as they are and give you the full perspective you need to be a leftist, also with a pretty good perspective on what's going on outside the United States borders. Thank you so much for listening. It's been Newsflash.